When you're in a mastermind, in a cohort, you tend to get the things done purely because you don't want to be the person that shows up and says, I didn't get it done, right? So let's apply that same mindset to content creation. People are craving that accountability. It always seems hard when you go it alone.
Welcome to the 4 a.m. Report. Let's face it, we all have to market. Large or little, it's harder than ever to stand out in a cluttered space of one-size-fits-all and copycat marketing moves. Welcome to the 4 a.m. Report, a micro-podcast that brings you valuable conversations with people on the marketing dilemmas keeping them up at night. Here are your hosts, contrarian marketers and creative clutter cutters, Susan Diaz and Will Lamont.
Hi, everybody. We're recording today at Susan's place. We're getting back to hanging out a little bit here. Welcome to the 4 a.m. Report. Susan, I am going to start today's episode by reading you a quote. I want to see if you know who this quote is by. And of course, I just lost it there. Anyways, okay, here we go, folks. This is the quote. It's an infamous quote. Tell me if you know what it is. I've always wanted to do a show with women of different generations, backgrounds, and views. A working mother, a professional in her 30s, a young woman just starting out, and then somebody who's done almost anything and will say almost anything. Okay, that is a quote that started a TV show which began back in the late 90s.
Okay, I know exactly who it is, but I'm going to
pretend. Of course you know.
I'm going to pretend for this one. No, Will, tell me who it is.
It's The View. That was Barbara Walters. When The View first kicked off in the late 90s, it started with Barbara reading this, and it showed the 5 different women who joined this panel, a very, very revolutionary for its time for daytime TV, women coming on, talking about politics, sharing their expertise, of course, talking about entertainment and making jokes, talking about social injustice. It really was groundbreaking to have women on an all-women panel on daytime TV talking politics and social issues.
I love that. Real feminist agenda that had, and it really resonates. And we're talking about Joy, right? Done anything and almost anything.
That was Joy. Joy, who's been on the show for the 24 years it's been on. But the reason we are talking about The View, not just because I really do like it a lot and watch it regularly, we're talking about The View because it's inspired one of the latest things that we're doing, one of our latest offerings that we're really excited about. So we're going to talk about that today. I'll let you introduce what we're talking about here.
Yes. In somewhat immodest fashion, we're going to call ourselves the Barbara Walters of this situation and say that what we are trying to do here with podcasting is to replicate The View, replicate that idea of people with different perspectives coming in to share it with a wide audience of people, right? And so the way that we're applying that to podcasting is by creating cohorts of 5 people. For now, we're focusing on women because you know what? We want to further the feminist agenda as well. Mm-hmm. Hasn't furthered itself as much as it should till 2021. Yeah. That said, so putting together these panels in which you're showing up and sharing that thought leadership, having a consistent content creation engine that's facilitating that so you'll get it done. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we've been having a lot of conversations with people about the subject. And from it, we've got these 5 learnings or 5 things that we're finding that people are saying over and over again.
And before we get into that, I wanted to just shout out something you had done with some of the people in your circle. This is another thing that inspired this. Susan was part of a podcast panel called Insights, where she was representing the marketing voice. There was someone representing the legal advice for entrepreneurs, someone representing that business coach advice, mindset advice, law advice. So everything an entrepreneur kind of needs to hear as they grow and build their business. And that was a successful foray into paneling. So that was another inspiration.
That is 100% the thing. And sometimes the timing of things are not always right. We started on this path a while ago, and then the pandemic, So you've got to favor your own headspace and bandwidth. And so, here we are again doing it. And these are the sort of things that we've learned from it.
These are kind of the why we feel the panel, this cohort podcasting thing is the way that people should consider, or something people should consider.
Yeah, based on long qualitative conversations, right? So do you want to start with the first one?
The first one is accountability, right? Especially founders, entrepreneurs, most people in general, your bandwidth, you're overstretched, right? So it's easy to say, I'm going to start this podcast, and then 3 weeks go by and you just haven't had time to do it, right?
Yeah.
Setting something up knowing that you're accountable to 4 other women, because you all need to come together to record, produce, and get this out. It's just kind of it's a non-negotiable now.
Yeah.
You're committing to this, and you're committing to this group that you've formed.
100%. I think that accountability that comes from having to show up and do something with someone is big. It's certainly something that exists in masterminds a lot, and we'll be talking about that in the next episode. A little bit about how you can leverage masterminds, but really, when you're in a mastermind, in a cohort, you tend to get the things done purely because you don't want to be the person that shows up and says, I didn't get it done, right? So let's apply that same mindset to content creation. People are craving that accountability. It always seems hard when you go it alone. So that's the first thing.
The next, bandwidth.
The next thing, and you touched on it briefly over there, Will,
kind of tied together,
is the bandwidth of it. Like, so most often people get that, okay, the sound medium is sort of like the future. Like, it's been growing nonstop. If you take a look at the podcasting industry, it's exploded in many ways, so many acquisitions and growth. So it can only go up.
Don't you feel we've gotten to the point where it's almost like, if you don't have a podcast or you don't have something representing your content in audio form, you're almost behind, you're starting behind, already?
I think
especially right now, the way it's just exploded. It's almost expected if you're a brand, even personal brands. The podcast is an easy way to communicate.
100%, 100%. And I think that the it's like a blog, right? Like, at one point, every website had to have the word blog on there to count, and that's how the SEO engines read your stuff and whatever. That said, right now, I think every single website, at least at a company level first, needs to have podcasts on it. So that's the future. There's where the opportunities are to be had. And why not leverage it? So when people recognize that as a point, the first resistance that you often hear is bandwidth. Like, I don't have the time to do this, and it, like, shudder. Like, will I be able to do a podcast a week? It sounds like a lot of work, and it is.
And you think about it, it's the planning the episode, the recording, getting it edited. You or someone on your team has to write the copy, or write the blog post, get it out there, distribute it. So it can seem like an overwhelming task.
It can. So, what you want to think about then is when you do something like this, in which you are doing it with 3 or 4 other people and potentially outsourcing it as well, though it's totally possible to do it yourself if you want it. If you're doing it in that way, you're cutting your bandwidth, because what you're doing is this is syndicated content. This is similar material that's going to go out through 4 or 5 feeds. They're going to be cross-linked, and all of that really matters. It's going to give you good Google juju, right? Like, that's basically how you take content and sort of like explode it into a lot more places. So thinking about bandwidth, like, how can you do the same amount of work for an incremental amount of output is really, I think, what you can achieve by being part of panels.
Right, exactly, for sure. Then the next thing was, obviously we've not had in-person events over the last little while, and we're just slowly starting to get back to those, and some people might not want to get back to those. So this panel allows you to amplify your network, grow your network by relying on, you've got, 4 other people that you're doing this panel podcast with. So you're being introduced to new networks, amplifying your voice through their channels as well. Yeah. So it is almost like taking the place of that in-person sort of
fireside chat.
Yeah.
The large stages in the fireside chats that were, there was like a lot of them before. It's not that they're entirely gone away, but I feel like there's ways in which you can do that through podcasting in panels like this, which you should leverage, right? So as far as the Insight podcast was concerned, Will, like, we definitely saw that it was a minimum of 5 times the regular traffic, if that makes sense, because it made, the same episode is being distributed by people who had different networks. There is some, like, commonality, I would imagine, but that said, there was a definite amplification of audiences. And as well, on that podcast, there were a couple of people who met through the podcast, and that therein comes the mastermind and the matching of the panels for the audiences. A couple of people who met through that, who subsequently ended up doing programs together, like the lawyer and the financial advisor avatars ended up doing business together on a few programs, because typically entrepreneurs do tend to need those 2 pillars of information at the same time, right? I mean, like, if you're having an issue, you need the lawyer and the money part. So that's it's a really good way to amplify your audiences, really good way to show up and create that content engine that repeatedly gets you seen by multiple people. So that's the third
It's
point.
kind of, you were also talking, it's kind of like that masterclass idea.
It is pretty much like the masterclass idea. And I think the other benefit that we heard a few people articulate was the fact that people are not going to have to sift through 5 or 6 podcasts from specialists on 5 or 6 pillars. If they want, like, for example, one of the panels we're putting together now is the Retirement Ready Women show. And on that, we're talking about women of like the 45 and 50 and up, and what do they need? Now, if you have to listen to a financial podcast and a real estate podcast and a, mental health podcast, sure, probably you do, but getting it all there.
Bringing those experts together to talk to that one audience, because they all share that one audience, even though they're all coming at it from a different angle, a different perspective, a different industry, a different level, or a different area of expertise. That's the idea behind the podcast. The next thing we wanted to talk about was something we've been leaning into forever, and we're talking about it a lot now. You're publishing weekly columns about it. We're working on a book. It's about the entertainment quotient. When part of the thing with The View was it's bringing women together who can be very serious, but they're also going to have some fun too. Bringing some levity, making a joke here and there, that sort of thing. It's the entertainment quotient. And just the fact that we referenced The View as one of the inspirations behind it. We played up in some of our writing the whole angle of we're the Barbara Walters here. What Barbara did or what The View did for daytime TV back in the late 90s, we want to try to do for podcasting in 2021, right?
Yeah.
So we're having fun with that and using this one metaphor, and the metaphor is resonating. That's one of you've been talking to a lot of people, and people are like, oh, The View. Whoever would have thought, but yeah.
It's true. I keep saying this often, sometimes you can put together a 25-slide pitch deck when you're talking to someone where you walk through all the benefits and they'll retain very little. But when we say a sentence like, do you know The View? We're trying to do what The View did for podcasting.
Yeah.
And people get it in the first 3 minutes. It's that hook. We often talk about it. You got to have a hook in anything that you do, whether it's a pipeline, whether it's a podcast, whether it's your whatever. So I think that people are really resonating with that. They're craving that idea of some levity, some fun, some humor. These are uncertain times, yo. So, so that's the fourth finding, and then the last finding. I think this is we've been talking about values a lot in a few of our podcasts, but it's about that value of being better together. Like we are better together. That came out of the pandemic. It became articulated, it became a hashtag. So many people used it to tell their stories, and that continues. I think it's a really great value to take out of the pandemic. We are really truly better together. I've always talked about wingman. Like no matter what I do, I need a wing person. Like I'm just a deeply introverted human, and I do better when I have someone to feed off of. So I think that being better together as you create content, the amplification, the ability to cut on the bandwidth. There's a lot of like it's a cause that you can all sort of like dedicate yourselves to. So that right there is the 5 points, like the 5 real, to us it's like benefits, but really the 5 key reasons why we think this is a good idea considering podcasting in panels. The first is you get to create with a level of accountability and structure. The second is that some of the bandwidth problem of creating solo can go away. The third is that it's a really meaningful way to amplify networks when you're not necessarily doing as much in-person FaceTime on stages and panels. The fourth is, the real value of an entertainment quotient, bringing a story and whatever. And the final is centering to that value of we are better together and taking that out of pandemic into your content production.
Which is a nice way to end this conversation and this episode of the 4 a.m. Report. If you do have any questions about, we're just launching this and having conversations, but we're going to be diving in really soon. If you do want to talk more about this, just reach out to us. We're really obsessed with this idea right now, so we'd be happy to chat.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you're losing sleep over a marketing-related problem, let us know. Drop us a line at cp.digital. Sweet dreams. Well, hopefully.